Hey guys, this is Chad from Trail Exploration. Today I'm just going to go over kind of a brief overview of off-road recovery and winching, some of the tools and techniques that I use when I'm out overlanding and traveling. I've been doing this pretty steadily for about the last 15 years. Really been heavier into the off-road side of things in the last 5 or 6 years. But I've been doing this pretty much my whole life. I have a Jeep that I bought when I was 14. I still own it, and I'm almost 50 years old now. So I've been doing off-road for a long time. Not that I know everything, but I do know some basic things that I hopefully can share some tips and tricks today. So first of all, I just kind of want to show you a few scenarios. So this is one where if you didn't have a way to self-recover yourself like a winch, you're going to be stuck in this mud hole. Now typically you're not going to go into something like that when you're by yourself, but if you do, you really need some way to recover. Now we're here with friends, so we're able to just winch him out easily. Here's a scenario where you're going along a trail, just get stuck in a mud hole. Could have turned the vehicle around and just backtracked, but that's no fun. So if you have a winch, it's a real quick recovery to get out. And this is just a picture of my rig showing that I have got stuck once in the last 15 years, or actually probably 15 times every year. I get stuck a lot. That's why I kind of know how to do this self-recovery. I also want to talk a little bit about some of the things not to do. So this is one of my friends here. He's up in, we're at Kansas Rocks, and we're trying to go up this ledge. He wants to utilize the skinny pedal, which is fine. I tried that a couple of times. I said, hey, let's just stop and let's just get you up there so we don't tear anything up. So he stopped, and this is us pulling the vehicle on up the rock ledge safely, but it's a little bit too late because his skinny pedal, he went ahead and exploded his drive shaft. So this is in Kansas, and he actually had to drive the rig back to St. Louis on just the front differential. So that's kind of one of the things that I like to talk to people when we're out off-roading. I was like, hey, you give it a couple shots and then let's just stop. There's no pride in getting up something if it's going to destroy your vehicle. So let's just stop, utilize a recovery rope, let's use a tow rope, use a winch, whatever it is, let's just get you over the obstacle so we can finish the day. Obviously, his day was finished here, and he had to leave, and we were having a pretty good day. So I'm going to talk about all different kinds of equipment and tools and things, and one of the things is emergency communication devices. If you're unable to do a self-recovery and you're way out in the woods or you're way off somewhere, and you're not able to get yourself out, you do need a way to communicate to people. There's a lot of options out there. A lot of times people think, oh, I'll just get a Wii Boost and it'll boost my signal. But I have friends that have that and they really don't do anything when you're out with her. Wii Boost is only good for if you have a little bit of signal to make the signal better. But if there's no signal, you're not going to get signal. There's a lot of options on the market, things like ham radio. You could just buy a ham radio and use it for emergency uses only, or you could get your license to operate the ham radio. The GMRS radios, like we have here, these are a good option. There's a lot of different types. I have a base unit in my truck. I've got the handhelds, things like you can go a little more complicated with the Baofeng and the radio oddities or something like a simple Midland. I like the Midland. It's real simple. We want to change channels. I can switch over real quick. I don't have to program it in. These are good too because maybe you're out somewhere off-roading and you get stuck, and there's a good possibility that somebody else out there has a radio that's on. Typically, we run on channel 16, and that's what a lot of the Overlander and off-road guys run on, so maybe they could hear you, and you could communicate to them your GPS coordinates, so they could come hopefully help you out. There's all the different types of satellite communicators, like the InReach Mini 2. I had one of those too. I just ended up selling it because there's actually another option out there that I probably could have kept it, should have kept it, but I didn't. Now with the satellite communications on your phone, it's a really good option. So how that works, I actually used it a couple weeks ago down in the Ouachita National Forest. We had 0 cell service. I had a friend coming in from Little Rock, and I wanted to communicate to him to where we actually determined where our campsite was going to be that afternoon, and he was coming in late. So what you do on AT&T, you have free satellite texting. On T-Mobile, you have Starlink satellite texting. And in the future, I think if you go to T-Mobile right now, you can sign up for the beta right now, and you can get signed in until the free testing until like July this year. And after July, when they fully launch Starlink, you can buy it across pretty much any platform. I think AT&T is going to be about $20, and T-Mobile, I think if you sign up now, at the time of this video, then I think you get half off, so it'd be like $10. But AT&T right now has satellite texting. I just used it. So what you do is you take your phone out and you'll see that little satellite image in the corner of your screen, and then this little icon thing will pop up. You have to open up your messaging, and then what's going to happen is you're going to get a little satellite view here, and it's going to tell you to point this little green thing at the satellite. And once you align those things and find it, then it'll connect and you can send your message. One of the things that I would recommend doing if you're going to utilize satellite texting on your phone is to let the person that you're going to communicate with know that if they see, like this says iMessage satellite, if they see a satellite message, they should probably respond back quickly, because you're not going to have service for very long. Now, they'll go ahead and they can go ahead and respond. It's going to go out in the cloud, and then when you get service again or you want to reconnect to the satellite, you'll get all those messages. But it's just a really good thing. I actually have used it several times now. And it's something I would recommend learning how to utilize if you haven't already. One of the other things I want to talk about is understanding your vehicle and the features that it has. So many times we go out on a trail, and a lot of times I like to lead new people. I really enjoy getting new people out, showing them what to do, giving them some encouragement, kind of teaching the skills that I know to get them out on the trails. But what happens is a lot of times somebody will get stuck, they get on the radio, and they're like, hey, I'm stuck, I need some help. So I walk back there and I'm like, hey, only one of your tires are turning. Do you have it in four-wheel drive? Oh no, I forgot to put it in four-wheel drive. All right, let's put it in four-wheel drive. Then they reach down and they're in a brand new Jeep Gladiator or a Wrangler. They reach down to the four-wheel drive, they try to engage it, it won't engage. They don't even know how to do it. The sequence of putting it in neutral and then shifting it into low, or how to turn on their lockers and turn your lockers off. So a lot of times it's like, hey, you got all these features, there's no reason to get stuck. If you get in a situation, make sure you're utilizing all the features you have on your vehicle, like front and rear lockers. And then you get on the radio, hey, I can't turn, something's wrong. Well, you got to turn your lockers off. You're completely locked up, all your wheels are turning. Sway bar disconnects, people don't understand how to utilize those sometimes. Crawl control and hill descent, I really like those two features, especially if you have something like the Ford F-150 platform that I have, where you can utilize your hill descent and you can set the speed, and it may be, sometimes those features will actually kind of like gear your vehicle down. So if your first gear in low is a little bit too high, if you use your hill descent, you can turn that down to whatever, if you want to be 1 mile an hour. So what happens is it keeps your accelerator at 1 mile an hour, and it also applies the brakes. So all you've got to do at that point is just grab hold of the steering wheel and steer. And it really works well in situations where you might be like rock crawling or something, where somebody is spotting you and you're just really going slow, controlled over some obstacles. But the other big one is when every time we go out for we're going to an off-road park, we're going on a day trip, we're going on a weekend trip, somebody's joining me for an overland trip, the first thing we talk about is, where are your recovery points? If something happens, you need to know where they are. Where are they at on the front? Where are they at on the rear? Do you have any? What options are we going to utilize if you don't have any on the front, or maybe you don't have any on the rear? But those are just things you need to look at. And those are things you need to really look at maybe investing in, is some sort of way to recover your vehicle from the rear. Maybe it's a way to recover your vehicle from the front. If you don't have all the aftermarket, bumpers and things yet, then you really should look at some alternative methods to be able to recover your vehicle if it gets stuck. And then the recovery. This is one of my other, I don't want to say it's a pet peeve, but it's one of the things that I'm trying to get better at when I'm out with a bunch of people off-roading, is every time there's a situation where somebody gets stuck, it's like everybody hurries, rushes around, and gets careless and unsafe. And I'm like, hey, let's just slow this all down. Let's get it in slow motion. Let's look at the situation. Let's work the problem. What do we need to do? How are we going to do it without tearing up their vehicle, without tearing up the recovery vehicle, without somebody getting injured or hurt? And how do we do it without treading as lightly as we can on the land that we're on? So one of the biggest things is just get somebody to be in charge. Usually if I'm leading a trip, I'm the one that's going to be in charge. I'll just take charge and say, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to help, I'm going to talk to, in a scenario where we're having two vehicles, I'm going to go and talk to the vehicle that's stuck and say, here's what we're going to do. We're using a recovery rope. We're putting it on the rear of your vehicle. You know, Joe back here, he's going to pull back about 10 feet. We're going to pull you out of this situation. What I'm going to do is tell you, make sure you have it in reverse. Make sure your foot is off the brake, and when I say to give it a little gas, you're going to help kind of assist that recovery. Then I'm going to go back to the assist vehicle and say, here's what we're going to do. I need you just to go in reverse about 10 feet when I flag you or talk to you on the radio and let you know that, hey, this is what we're going to do. So everybody understands what we're doing, and we also assess the situation to make sure that, yes, that is the safest thing. And if you're not sure, there's times I'll ask, hey guys, what do you think? What should we do? Oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that. This is a scenario here with one of my friends. We're out in Colorado, and he's not utilizing the equipment that's on his vehicle to off-road safely. And one of those things is a sway bar disconnect. I'd asked him early in the trip if he would disconnect the sway bar. He didn't have electronics, so it was going to be a mechanical disconnect, and he just didn't want to do it. So this is in Colorado, and I'll just kind of show you. The vehicle really loses a lot of its articulation because of the sway bar being connected. And I'd ask him at this point, I said, hey, stop. And then I had to yell at him, stop, because he was continuing on. And you guys all know that, you know, the videos and the pictures really never show the elevation, but this is a huge drop off down here. And at this point, we're shutting it down. So I got him to stop. He did. I was in front of him to, I was supposed to spot him, but he was moving too fast. And then what we had to do is we had to just do a simple. Now, I looked at this video and I said, I always look at all the videos. That's why I video them. And I go back and say, hey, what could we do different? How could we be safer? You know, we could have potentially put a vehicle here and then like a recovery ring or a snatch block and got more of an angle. But really what we were trying to do is just get him a little bit. We're trying to control the vehicle and just get him off of that little bit of a ledge. Now he's driving a stick shift, a manual, so it's a little bit harder for him just to ease into that. But we're controlling the vehicle. We're able to get him out of this situation and back on the trail. And it was a safe recovery. We're using a tree saver up on the tree to protect the tree out there. And then once we got that, we just reeled him back in. So that's just, you know, if you've got those pieces of equipment, use them. If you've got, you know, if you're going through a tough obstacle and you've got a rear locker, use the rear locker. If you've got a sway bar that disconnects or some other means on your vehicle, use it. Don't put yourself in a dangerous situation. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about tools and supplies that we use. This is just kind of an example of some of the things that we take out on the trip. One of the biggest things I take is just making sure I have basic mechanic type tools. So I always have, you know, metric and standard sockets. I always have deep and shallow sockets. I also always have wrenches, open-end wrenches. I actually like the gear wrenches. I have those for both metric and standard. And then I like the tool roll because everything is neatly stored inside of the tool roll. And then I always carry impact sockets because I carry a DeWalt impact. And that way, if I need to change a tire quickly or remove a piece of suspension or something, I can do that. Some of the other tools that we carry is a spark plug socket for your vehicle. So there may be a time you need to do something with your spark plugs out there. A lot of people, if you have independent front suspension, I would have a axle socket that you can remove the front axle if you need to change out. Maybe you're all the way across the country and you need to change out a CV joint or something like that. We've done that multiple times on the trails. A few other things that we have is just some standard tools like channel locks. Not all the things are laid out here, but these are just some examples. I like to keep electrical tools and a little bit of stuff, like I have some black tape. I have, you know, miscellaneous wire. I keep the fuses for the vehicle and fuses for any accessories that I have. Another thing that I think is really important is having tire repair kit. So I have kind of a hodgepodge of different things, but I have a way to plug the tires, multiple plugs. This isn't all of them. I keep a lot of plugs. Another thing that I bought, and I'll show you, will be in a video in here in a little bit, where I had a valve stem fail, and I had a flat, and I was on the fence about buying these emergency valve stems, and then obviously when I got home I bought them. But What they do is you can actually pull the valve stem out. You can put this valve stem in, turn it, and then air up the tire. And it's an emergency thing. You want to go get it replaced after that. Other things, I always keep valve cores, and I keep a valve core wrench. I keep extra valve cover or valve stem covers because I don't want mud getting in there. Some other things, just some tape and things like that. A big deal, always have lots of zip ties because you never know what you're going to need to zip tie. I like to keep some sort of light, and I really like this light. This is just the light is actually off Amazon, but they make them to fit all kinds of batteries, and I never have to worry about this light being charged because I always have a bunch of these batteries, and it actually has a charger. You can do a USB and micro USB, or USB-C, sorry. And then they have other accessories like this thing that's kind of neat. It converts this over to 12 volts, so if you've got something you need to run, you can run it off of your batteries that you have. And then, also electrical, some sort. This isn't what I use. This is just kind of a prop out here, but a multimeter. That way, if you need to try to figure out what's going on with something. One other thing that's not really tool related, but I always keep this glass cleaner because if you get in a recovery situation and your vehicle windshield gets dirty, you want to be able to weigh. Obviously, you got your windshield wipers. But to really get the window clean so you can safely drive, I have several of these in the vehicle, but I always use this glass cleaner. And I use it even when we're just going out on trips, just to clean the windshield, keep the bugs off. And two, I like to video stuff, so it keeps all the windows clean, and so I can see out too. Now that was just an example of some of the tools I take. Obviously, there's going to be things that's going to be vehicle specific and things that you are going to have in your vehicle also. Like I said, that's not everything. That's just a good representation of what I keep. Off-road recovery shovels. I think those are important, that you have some way to get yourself unstuck if you need a shovel. I just have one of these little cheap Amazon style shovels, but it does work well. I always carry it with me. It's compact. If I get into a situation where I need to move some dirt or sand or something out from underneath my tires, I have a way. There are a lot of options. I actually just seen this one here. You can buy that very similar one at Harbor Freight. It's very cheap. And then, if you want to get real fancy, you can do something like this DOMS Delta shovel. Then we're like about $350. I focus on stuff like this. I'm not really big on having all that stuff on the side of my vehicle either. So the smaller stuff that's compact that I can keep in the vehicle, I prefer. But they are. Another thing that we use them for is at the campsites. We always have a fire. It's something you can use to get in there and spread the coals out, and then make sure you use your water to extinguish the fire. Vehicle recovery axes and saws. There's a lot of different options, and I've got a bunch of them over here. My favorite thing that I have is my Fisker's axe. This thing I've had it for about 4 years, and I really think that if I take care of it, it might be a lifetime purchase. I love to go to the campsite and split wood and do things like that. But if there are times when a lot of times when you're doing a recovery or winching, there may be a limb or something that would damage the vehicle or damage the recovery equipment, maybe the strap or the rope or whatever it is. Or there may be a time when you have to get into a tree and trim a little bit back so you can get your tree saver on safely. That's one option. A couple other options that I have is I just picked this up the other day and mainly use this for when we're going down. Sometimes I'll get out and trim some of the limbs off so they don't scratch all the vehicles up, which I get it. It's Ozark. Here we call it Ozark pinstriping, but it is nice to have though. Or if you get into a situation where you need to just trim a little tree back or something around a recovery situation, it does have a saw on the back of it. One of my other favorite tools is this Gerber hatchet. I love to just make kindling when we're going to make firewood, but it's also another thing that you can utilize to trim some trees or something. And it's kind of got a cool feature. It has this little saw in the end of it, so if you need to cut a branch or something, you can. A lot of times you need to clear a little bit of the space up. Unfortunately, when you're doing some of this, we try to minimize the amount of cutting that we do in the forest unless it's clearing a trail. Other options are things like this bow saw, just a simple bow saw. These work excellent. I use this all around the farm all the time. There's things like the Burrell Canyon, the Canyon Burrell 21 saw, which is kind of cool. It's got a Swedish blade, and all that kind of folds up and protects that blade. This one here I don't really like to take because it is sharp and it will damage stuff. And then lastly, one of my new things that my friends have talked me into getting is a chainsaw. I was always like, I don't need a chainsaw. I'm not going to go cut wood. Why would I need a chainsaw? Well, what if you go into a campsite, and like right now today, it's actually storming outside, and a tree falls down over the trail, and you can't winch it out of the way, and you've got to cut it. Having a chainsaw could be invaluable. This is a little 12-inch, and I keep all the batteries for all the other tools that I have, so I always have batteries for it. But you can cut about a 20-inch tree with this if you had to. But it's small, compact. Obviously, there's all kinds of brands. You know, you don't have to have a specific brand, but I just have a lot of DeWalt tools, so I utilize the DeWalt tool line. High lift jacks. So we're going to talk a little bit about high lift jacks, and I'm going to grab one over here. So pretty much know what a high lift jack looks like. We have several of these out here on the farm. They are probably the best piece of recovery tool that's, you know, not electric that you could have. Recovery, not tire jacking or jacking your vehicle up. Pros, they have the tallest lifting capacity of any jack that's out there. They're fast and simple to use. You can just grab them and use them. They don't require space underneath the vehicle, meaning you don't have to get underneath the vehicle. You can put this on a rock slider. You can put it on a front or rear bumper. Now, I'll talk a few other things. They can be used for manual winching, which is really cool. So there's this. Hopefully you can see this, but there's this hole here. There's one at the bottom, and I'll show a diagram here in a minute how you utilize that. Out on the farm, we use them we can put them under something solid, and you can actually put them on the edge of a tire and break a bead if you need to change a tire. Cons, they're heavy and bulky to store. They're affected by dirt and the elements. They require maintenance. You've got to have some kind of oil or WD-40 to keep them working, or they won't work. They're not designed for stock vehicles, so as I'm looking at my F-150 right now, I don't know where I would utilize it. I have painted bumpers. It's going to tear everything up. They're really not even going to hold on to those bumpers. They're made for aftermarket type vehicles if you're going to use them to lift the vehicle. Yeah, they're really dangerous. I know a lot of people that's been injured with those, and we can kind of go through some of that stuff. And you're going to need some sort of base plate so they don't just sink down into the ground. Now, this is a scenario here where you hook into the top, which I said here, and then into the bottom, and then with some straps, you can recover your vehicle either in the front or the rear. If you don't have a winch, but at least you can recover yourself, and it's going to be a slow recovery because you're only going to go about 3 or 4 feet at a time, and then you're going to have to readjust your straps. But it is a very versatile tool in the off-road world. Now, this is a picture of my vehicle with the valve stem that I talked about that blew out. It would have been really easy if I had the emergency valve stem because I could have just popped that in and not had to worry about changing the tire. Now, this is the last day that I ever had a high lift jack in my vehicle or on my vehicle. Obviously, I was one of the unsmart people that would keep it up on the hood because it looked cool. I didn't realize the dangers that could be if you got into an accident, because that could actually come off and go through the windshield. But in this scenario, was out with friends all day long, and they all decided to go home, and I said, oh, I want to do this one easy trail over by Sand Gap, Arkansas. It did not turn out to be an easy trail. A lot of trees down, had to do a lot of stuff to move stuff out of the way. And I had previously in that day damaged the valve stem, and I thought, oh, I'll put this Gorilla Tape on it because it was such a small leak. Coming down this hill, the valve stem shot off like a rocket, and my tire went immediately flat. I ended up driving down the hill to a safe, flat place, but with the articulation of the vehicle and the lift and the size of tires, I wasn't even able to get the tire off. I had to actually kind of drag the tire out. I had to let air out of this tire to put this one back on. Now, I could have went and got something, but there really was nothing. I walked all over the place. There was nothing to put under there. I could have turned the rim around and used that as a jacking point. But then I couldn't, obviously change the tire if I'm using that rim. I got it off, but I decided at that point that was the very last day that I would have a high lift jack on my vehicle. It's not made for changing tires. No, it's a bad idea. Do's and don'ts, like I said, keep a safe distance from those jacks. it's better to use some sort of base plate. You can, there is stuff like this that you can put on the jack that you can actually, if you need to raise the vehicle to do some sort of work, not changing the tire. Like it says, don't use it to change the tire. Don't go too high. I've seen so many times that people out on the trail use a high lift jack and the vehicle just falls over, and we have to try to get it back up safely, or it just continues to fall and fall because that's their only scenario. I personally went straight home and bought a bottle jack, and this is what I use now all the time. One of the things that I added to this, because there's not a lot of surface on the top of this, but this is a lot easier because now instead of trying to raise the body and get all the articulation and everything, I just go right to the axle and I just raise the axle with the tire, so I don't have to come off about that high. But one of the things that I did add is this little yoke type thing that fits on the top of this that allows you to put that safely around your axle and have a more controlled lift. Now this one, I was going to buy one of these forever, but they were really expensive, and I have a welder and a cutting torch, and I have steel, and I was like, well, I'll just make one. Well, that never happened. I just happened to be on Amazon the other day, and these were $20. I mean, this thing is heavy duty. $20. It's definitely a thing I would add to your kit. Pros, they're excellent recoveries in hard compacted soils. They're more stable. They're more steady lifting. They're hydraulic, so it's not like the high lift jack where you're going up and down. And it's kind of uncontrolled. This is very controlled. It's less affected by dirt and the elements because typically you're going to have that thing safe away in your vehicle because it's very small. Typically, you just need to make sure it's that your jack can fit under your vehicle. I've seen people show up and they've got the big 20-ton jack, and I'm like, do you know that won't fit under your axle? Like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to lift it from the frame. I'm like, okay, well then you're going to have to lift it until you get through your articulation of your vehicle and get the tire off the ground. They're like, oh, I never thought of that. Cons, they're not practical in soft terrains. They want to sink. But if you have a base plate, you got to have some sort of base plate. I always keep something I can put underneath the jack if I'm in a soft area. They have shorter lift, but there is things like this safe jack. I think is a really neat option. Same scenario, kind of have the cradle, yoke, whatever you want to call it. You have the jack, and then you have these extensions and a base plate and a bigger handle. That one is about $319, and that was a while back, so I don't know what it is now. But that's a good scenario, and people are like, oh, $319, I'm not paying that for a bottle jack. Well, if there's certain pieces of equipment you should really look at investing in, and maybe, yeah, I have kind of the same thing, but I don't have the extensions, which I would be able to use on maybe other people's vehicles. But you think about it, how much does it cost to get recovered if you get stuck somewhere, or to have somebody come change a tire if you can't change a tire? I mean, $300 is not that much in the grand scheme of things, if you're doing this enough to make it worth your while. All right, off-road recovery boards. These are kind of the laughing stock of the Overland world because every single person that gets a vehicle, this is about one of the first things they put on it somewhere because they look cool, and you can say, oh, look, I'm an Overlander now. But they actually have a lot of good uses, and a lot of people argue this with me, but we've used these extensively, and you can look at it and you say, well, it doesn't look like you've used it. Well, the back side is the side that gets tore up mostly. Because what we try to do is really slow, controlled recoveries. We'll just slide this underneath the tire. A lot of times if you're trying to, you're stuck on something, you're stuck in a soft area, and then you can put these at all 4 tires, maybe 2 tires, maybe the 2 tires that are the drive tires. But they're really good in soft sand and loose rock scenarios. Another really good use for them is if a vehicle has the rear differential, the pumpkin gets hung up on a tire or gets hung up on a rock or a boulder or something, you can put this on one side and stack these up. And we don't stack them, a lot of people stack them right on top of each other. I stack them kind of offset so that gets taller. So we're already gained like 4 inches, and if we have 4 of them, we're up to 8 inches. And that may be just enough to get that vehicle up and over that boulder or that rock carefully without causing any other damage. And yeah, you could go find some little flat rocks, but if you've ever tried to stack rocks and drive on them, the minute you drive on them, they just kind of fall apart, and it's not really safe. I think these are great. You can use them. A lot of people utilize them at camp to level their vehicle if you got a rooftop tent or something like that. We've used them to cross through like ditches and things where you kind of just put 3 or 4 of them down or 2 of them, and create like a little bridge. I use the MaxTrax MK2s. This is kind of a cry once, buy once situation with me. I've seen so many of those cheap Chinese ones that you buy off Amazon that are just broken. They break the very first time. If I'm going to take that down off my vehicle and use it, I don't want it to break. I want to be able to use it. I don't keep it out on the vehicle all the time. I only use it when we're going on a trip or something. So that way it, doesn't get more UV problems with the sun and things like that. And also, when we utilize them, I always tell people it's not a skinny pedal situation. We're going to slowly try to crawl up on these, because if you get on there and you gas it, they're just going to shoot out of the way. There are a few other alternative self-recovery methods, and I'll show you this. So this one's pretty easy, but it's very useful. You just need something like a tow rope like this, some sort of strap. And what you're going to do is you're going to make sure you don't get into your valve stem, but you're going to bring it into the tire and feed it through. And then what you'll do is you'll bring that on into this, out this area here. This is on, let's say we're doing a rear recovery at this point. You want to get the strap straight in the center of the tire. And then what's going to happen is you're going to put it in gear, and this is going to kind of come around and tighten up. You want to stop and come out and look at this and make sure everything's straight. So this end is actually going to be over to potentially a tree. Generally, you're going to want to run it over to both tires so you have more power. So it's kind of in a Y scenario to like a tree saver or something. And this is like a rear recovery, even though you have a winch in the front, but if you need to get recovered in the rear. And when you put this in reverse and start turning, it's just going to use this tire. It's going to tighten up because you're going to have tension on it. And this strap is just going to go ahead and, this is backwards, but this is going to loop around. And as you slowly turn your tire, it's going to pull you towards the direction you're wanting to go. So that's a real simple alternative recovery method. And really all you need is a tow strap, and you should have a tow strap. You should have a way to help get yourself out at least, at a minimum, a tow strap. All right, well that's one scenario. Here's another one. So this is where you just use a piece of wood, a log or something, and a little strap, and you run that strap through the rim, similar to what we did here, but then you have the board on the outside. What happens is you want to make sure that inside of that log or board is not going to hit the inside of the vehicle when you're doing a rotation. But this vehicle's stuck in the grass. You put that 2x4 or whatever you have in there, and you can't really see it probably in the video, but as that comes around, it'll just bring you out. That's another scenario. It's kind of an alternative mode to get yourself out of a situation. There are also things like this, these bog outs, where you can do the same thing, strap it around the tire, and as you turn, it's just going to bring you in forward or reverse. I think that's a really good thing. I'm actually thinking about buying this because it's kind of already set up, and it's going to be a little bit longer than the strap I have. So it's just another option out there. So a lot of questions we get around, usually we get to the trail and you got the new people, and they come up and they say, hey, how much do I air down to? And I usually tell them, well, if we're going to do, rocky terrain, you're going to be somewhere between 15 and 20. Like, oh my gosh, my tire's going to come off the rim. No, it's not. You can easily go down to 12 pounds without any chance of that. Well, I don't say any chance, but more than likely you're not going to have any issues. You don't have to have bead locks to go down. We're not going to 5 pounds. You can kind of see here from the chart how much of the tire is actually touching at 35 pounds, at 25 pounds, and then how much surface area we have at 15 pounds. Generally people come out and they're like, oh, I don't want to air down. And then I'm like, when we get on the trail, you're going to have a higher risk of punctures to your tires. You're going to be extremely uncomfortable because it's going to ride extremely rough. And then you're not going to be able to grip around rocks and things like this and crawl over things. It's going to be almost like, I tell them it's a scenario of like a wagon wheel. You're going to be driving down this trail with like a wagon wheel. I've had people show up to the trail and I'm like, well, how much air do you have? And they're like, well, I have 50 pounds. I'm like, oh gosh, let's at least get you down to 20. I typically run about 18 pounds all the time if I'm going to be out on the trail. Even if we just pull out on a gravel road, it may be bumpy. I'm airing down because it's so much more comfortable. It's like you can have the best suspension in the world. In my opinion, when you air down, it's like doubling that suspension. Now, there's a lot of options to air down. People have the hoses where you can do it all at one time. There are options like this that I don't really like at all. I have one of these and I really probably never use it again. But this goes in and you just unscrew the valve stem and then you pull on it and you're pulling the valve stem out and then you're letting the air out and then you put the valve stem back in. I've seen people, myself included, I pulled this off one time and the valve stem just shot out. I don't know what happened, but I didn't put it in back correctly, so that's why now I carry valve stems. I was like, oh my gosh, I was by myself. I'm like, what am I gonna do? And it took me a moment. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna take the one out of the spare. And I'm like, oh cool, now I have no spare. So yeah, that you wanna have, you can see that's kind of the kit, the things I have. I personally like these. These are just, this one actually is a Terraflex, but they make them on eBay and Facebook. I used to give them out because they're like $3 if you buy them on eBay. There's 4 of them, they unscrew. I've been using these for like 3 or 4 years now. You just screw them on the valve stem, and then if you have a vehicle that has a way to monitor your PSI of your tire, I just look inside on the dash, and then when I get to 18 pounds, I just take it off. But if you don't have that, you can also just put a tire tool in here and check the pressure. But these work very good and they work very fast. But there is other options out there. This is another question I get quite a bit. I'm open to, you can send me a message anytime on Facebook Messenger. I'm more than happy to try to answer any question that somebody has. I'm a part of a lot of groups, overlanding groups, vehicle-specific groups, from Xteras to Toyotas to Jeeps to the vehicles that I've had, now F-150s, Fords, things like that. And people will, see that I do a lot of social media things, and they'll reach out and they'll say, hey, what size of winch do I need to get? I say, it's really simple. We need to weigh your vehicle, or you need to know how much your vehicle weighs, and let's just say it weighs 5,000 pounds. If that vehicle weighs 5,000 pounds, then you're going to take a safety factor of 1.5, so we'll take 5,000 times 1.5, that's going to give you 7,000 pounds. So anything from around 7,000 pounds, that's what size of winch you need. Now, there are a lot of options. There's 8,000, 10,000, 12,000. If your vehicle weighs 7,000, 7,500 pounds, I would go up to the next one. I would go to the 10,000. 10,000 is probably one of the most common size winches that are out there in the off-roading and overlanding world. That's going to be able to pull out pretty much any vehicle out there up to a 3/4 ton truck. You get above that, 12,000 pound, you're pulling, super heavy trucks, 1-ton trucks, big trucks. 12,000 plus above that, you're talking tow trucks. That's overkill. You don't need to do that. Now you can get away with a smaller vehicle, like if you're primarily running maybe a Tacoma and it's down in the 4,000 to 5,000 pound, 4,000. I don't know what a Tacoma weighs. I forgot, but you could potentially use the 8,000 pound winch. But what happens a lot of times is somebody will send me a picture and say, hey man, look at this great deal I got on this winch. I gave $200 for it. I'm like, cool dude, that's for an ATV. That's like a 2,000 pound winch. You're not going to be able to, you're going to destroy that thing. So you need to get a winch that is sized specifically for your vehicle. And we're going to talk a little bit about the winch components. Really, it's pretty basic stuff. There's a control box. There's a remote socket. So if you have a remote that's Bluetooth wireless like this, you do need to have a way to charge that thing. So it'll come with a cable, and if this battery goes dead, you need to know where this remote socket is so you can plug this in and utilize it through the wired method. The winch line, obviously, we'll talk a little more about winch line. We'll talk about safety hooks. One of the things that I would kind of point your attention to, if you get a new winch and it has this little strap on it, that's not for advertising, that's for safety. That's for you to pull the winch line out and not get your hand stuck in this. If somebody accidentally engages a winch, you can cause damage to your hands, but you just want to use this as your strap. And the other big thing is the fairlead, and there's a lot of different options out there. These are really good, the ones with the rollers. They're kind of old school, but they allow you to pull it at a side direction without causing as much damage to your winch line as you would if you didn't have that. Obviously, a lot of people just use the solid fairleads now, and that's actually what I use too. So honestly, if you're going to buy a piece of equipment for self-recovery, the winch is the best thing you can get. It's probably the most basic tool that you need. I don't actually have one on my truck yet because of the front bumper scenario with the EcoBoost and the intercooler. but I will probably get one on there here soon. I actually have a worn winch setting here on the table that I can utilize. There's a couple different kinds. There's steel line winch. We use steel line winch here on the farm. Here we'll just talk about the pros. It's less expensive. It's highly abrasive, resistant, so we can put it on a trailer. You know, it can run on edge of the metal or something. It's not going to damage it like if you had a synthetic rope. Requires less maintenance. You're not going to deal with the UV issues of the sun breaking down that synthetic rope. It's heavy. It can cause kinks, and almost every winch that we have on the farm has a kink in it because of just the way they are. They can rust. They always get little burrs because they do, you know, if it gets hung up on something, it's gonna cause a burr. You need to make sure you're always wearing gloves with steel line. Really, with any recovery, you need to have gloves on. It can't be repaired in the field. The synthetic rope line winch is what I recommend everyone. They are more expensive, but they're lightweight. So on average, a typical winch is going to weigh about 24 pounds lighter using synthetic versus steel. The synthetic winch line has a higher braking strength. It stores less kinetic energy, so the steel lines store a lot of kinetic energy. So meaning if it fails and breaks, it's going to shoot off like a rubber band. Typically, the synthetic, if they fail, they're probably just going to fall to the ground. They don't have a lot of energy where they're just going to sling back at something. It doesn't kink. It's a lot easier to spool one. If you've ever used a steel line winch, if you haven't, they are extremely hard to put back into back onto the drum because they want to kind of come loose and spin. The synthetic rope line can be field spliced. It floats. That's kind of cool. It is more expensive. It is less abrasion resistant. It does have issues with UV exposure, but I would always recommend a cover. I always put a cover on all of our winches. This is just for the worn winch I had. Once you put this cover on, I never had to take it back off because if you want to get to the line, you just pull up the Velcro. If you need to get to disengage the winch, you can reach in there, but this thing stays on. It keeps the winch line protected from the UV rays, dirt and dust and all those things, and it just prolongs the life of the winch itself. One other thing that was back there is that if a synthetic winch line gets wet when it's freezing, like you drive through a creek, you drive in a mud hole, and you come back out, kind of like this scenario here, if you were down in this water where it's all frozen and it gets wet, it's going to freeze. So you'll either have to have some water you can put back on it, but it's going to freeze up. If you ever seen a rope outside in the winter when it's just laying on the ground, it's all froze together, that's what it's like. Steel line doesn't do that, but the synthetic does. So that's one disadvantage. This is another example of a winching scenario. We're just winching from the rear, but this vehicle has 0 recovery gear with him. Luckily, he's in a group, and we're able to pull him out through the rear. It's just a simple winch, but this is about a 5-foot hole down in the Ozark National Forest. I wouldn't recommend what one of my friends is doing here, trying to pull the vehicle. I would stay out of that way because it's going to make it. Next thing we're going to talk about is some of the hooks. So almost every winch that you buy is going to come with this type of hook. I hate these. I take them off. The reason I hate them is because this little clasp always fails. And what happens is when you're winching with one of these and this doesn't have this clasp to hold your winch line or your recovery ropes or whatever you've got in there, and you lose tension, this falls down, it's just going to come loose, and then you've got to go and reset it. And there's times when you may be winching up a hill or something and you want to be controlled. You don't want that vehicle to come loose from the winch line because that's your safety line. I recommend it. You don't have to have this brand. This is just a Factor 55. This is a closed system. So this part goes back on the winch line, and then you've got this, and anything you put through here is secure. If it drops to the ground or anything, it's not going to come loose. It's just going to stay there. So you can put soft shackles. You can put these bow shackles through it. But I would definitely recommend these. There's a couple different types. The Pro Link's a pretty cool one where you can actually put that bow shackle on the end, and then the Ultra Hook is really my favorite, but it's the most expensive one because you have a place for a shackle, then you have a place where you could just click something in, and that hasp there is actually really good. This is generally what you see. These fall apart, it drops, and then you're in a bad scenario at that point. So off-road recovery kits, typically if you buy a kit, you're going to get a tow strap, a kinetic recovery strap, a tree saver, shackles, winching gloves, snatch blocks, maybe a recovery damper, and winch line extensions. We're going to talk about all those things. So a tow strap is what it is. It's just a tow strap. Typically, and I'll talk a little bit about these in a minute on the uses, but this is not going to stretch out. This is a worn, it's actually a Jeep worn tow strap that came with my Wrangler when I bought it. I use it all the time. There's specific situations where you're going to use a tow strap. And then the other one is the kinetic recovery rope. Actually, probably the piece of equipment that I use the most is this. We use this all the time, and I'll show you some examples. And I'll explain why you would use this versus the tow strap. And the other one that we use is a tree saver strap. So it's just what it is. It's a tree saver. It goes around a tree and kind of protects the tree from damage. And then it has two places to put a soft shackle or a bow shackle or whatever you need to do to go back to the vehicle. And this protects your winch line. You don't want to take your winch line and wrap it around a tree and expose your line to, bark or cut off pieces of branches or whatever it is. So this is a scenario of just a kinetic recovery where my vehicle gets stuck into, it's hard to believe, but this is actually the trail. We're coming through here. There's some ruts because people were driving all over the place, but I got kind of hung up, and obviously I need to recover from the rear. I can't recover from the front. My friend is over here. We've got just a kinetic rope, actually this rope. And as you can see, it's going to kind of slingshot me, and that's kind of what it does. And then gets me out, and then we're able to unhook and safely recover easily. This is another scenario where we're out in Virginia, and the trail goes through these rocks. He just kind of took the wrong line and doesn't have enough clearance here to get over this rock. So I actually I'm in the rear vehicle, so we just hook up a kinetic recovery rope. We're just going to do a really easy pull through the rear. We don't have to get a lot of force. We don't need a lot of kinetic energy, but we're not looking to rip his rear bumper off either. So this is kind of rubber bandy, real easy recovery, and then we were able to go through this obstacle. Here's a scenario of using the tree saver. You can use it in different ways, but this is one way to use it. We've got a soft shackle, and then we have our closed hook there. Coming down this trail, it just got rutted out, and he got stuck. And this is just a real simple recovery with the winch, a self-recovery. He's given some acceleration on the vehicle. Obviously, you can see he went ahead and locked in his lockers because all the tires are spinning. And then we're able to move on down the trail without damaging anything. So what's the difference between a static recovery and a kinetic recovery rope? Well, the biggest thing is a static rope is what it is. It's you're pulling something with very light tension. Generally, you're going to utilize two like weight vehicles or size vehicles, and it's just what it is. You see the videos where somebody puts on a tow strap and then they just gun it and they rip the rear bumper off. That is not what this is for. This is for a slow, controlled pull. There's times you can use this, there's times you can use that. Generally, we just go to the kinetic one because it's just the one we use, but you can use this one too. So if you're going to pull an F-150 with an F-150 or a Wrangler with a Wrangler, this is what you would utilize. Now, if you need to get that kinetic energy because you've got different gross vehicle weights, let's say you're pulling the pull vehicle is a Suzuki Samurai, and then you've got my F-150 that you need to recover. Well, you can get some kinetic energy because you can take off and get the rubber band effect with this kinetic rope because it's going to stretch quite a bit. And as that assist vehicle, puts some throttle down and gets a little bit of that kinetic energy in this, once that hits, that rubber band effect is going to happen, and it's going to kind of sling my vehicle out. Now, you can do it at you don't have to do it fast. You can do it slow. There's different speeds and different recoveries, but that's really the difference. I like to have this one here because if I did have a vehicle issue and I needed to get off the trail, I'd rather be pulled out with this static rope, maybe to the road where maybe a tow truck or something would come and get me. But these are also, these are great for winch extensions also because you're not going to get any spring in this. So let's say you don't have enough winch line and you need something to add to it, you can use tow straps. But it's good I would really recommend that you have both of them. shackles. It's funny. This shackle thing is really funny because every time I ask somebody, I say, "What is this?" And they're like, "It's a D shackle." I'm like, "No, there's no D. That's a bow." I grew up on a farm. I also work in the construction industry. A D shackle is used for inline lifting. So if you're winching something, you're hoisting something, it's to pull something straight. The bow shackle has got a better design to be used out in the off-road industry because we can pull it different directions. I actually like both of them. I have 4 of these and I have 3 of these. So I prefer the soft shackle just because if something fails and this comes flying back at me, it's a lot less than this thing flying back at me. Now I'll use this on a vehicle, I 100% prefer to use this on a recovery point on like an aftermarket bumper because those locations are usually pretty sharp, and a lot of times you can't even fit this in it, but you can put this on and then put a soft shackle on it. A little more work, but it protects your equipment in the long run. And then some of the other things are like snatch blocks. So we carry 2 of those. There's this like the most basic snatch block where you'll just put the winch strap into here and then run your whatever you want to put in here, soft shackle or bow shackle, and then hook up. And this is going to allow you to get a different direction, or if you're trying to increase the power of your winch. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The one that I probably jump out of the vehicle the most with is this recovery ring. You know, it's another one of those. This is just an Overland vehicle systems, but I can't imagine how this would ever fail. I'll keep this probably all my time off-roading. But you can see here we got a tree saver, and this is, you know, if you're doing a misdirected pull or you're increasing the power of your pull, and I'll show that here in just a second. So this is a scenario where you would be using a snatch block or a D-ring. We have a stuck vehicle over here. We've got the pulling vehicle over there. They actually call this out wrong. They say these are D shackles, and they're not. They're bow shackles. But this is allowing you a misdirection. A lot of people don't understand the most efficient part of your winch or the highest efficiency of your winch is when you have your line out further than closer. So if you really need to gain power, you need to pull that winch line way out. A lot of times I'll see people pull it out 10, 15 feet, and they're in a real stuck scenario. They hit the controller on the winch, and the vehicle just goes, and really nothing happens. There's not enough power in there to get that winch to cycle. So a lot of times what you need to do is double the winch power. So this is where you're running a snatch block to whatever. This could be a tree, this could be another vehicle, and then you're winching back to yourself. That will double the power of the winch. And if you really get into a stuck situation where you really have a heavy thing that you're trying to get out of a situation, or you're really, like I said, it's maybe really bogged down, maybe it's completely in a mud hole down to the frame, you can triple the winch. And this is where if your winch line's not long enough, you can use a strap or something. But you're going to come out to a snatch block, back to a snatch block on your vehicle, then back to a tree or some kind of anchor. This is kind of showing the same thing. We got a stuck vehicle over here, and it's just a way to get a misdirection, because you really don't want to be winching from this point to that point, because you need the vehicle to go this way. And generally when they get stuck, they don't just come in a line of where you want to be. They're usually something's happened. They've slid off the trail or something. And this is an example of how you're just winching back to your vehicle with a snatch block and doubling the power of your winch. So this is a scenario where we had to do this. So this is, we're trying to get up this trail. There's a large boulder here. Pay attention to the daylight and the lights on the vehicle. We've got about 10, 12 vehicles. We can't get this vehicle up this spot because there's ruts and it's off camber and it doesn't look bad in the video. The second video is we're trying a different attempt to get him up on this, and you can see we've already got the winch line out ready, but this big rock is getting hung up on the frame of the vehicle. So as you can see from the other video, now it's dark, but we tried to use a single winch line, and the winch did not have enough power to get the vehicle up. When we doubled it, as you can see, that was really quick to get that vehicle up over that obstacle and get us down the trail. Here's another example of just a simple winch, and I'm kind of showing some examples of, you know, making sure you have the right kind of equipment for your vehicle. Really in a really muddy area with either radials or all-terrain tires, really not the right tire for this situation. which it works fine if it's more of your daily driver, but if you're going to do more of the off-roading, you really should, move over to like mud tires. They have a lot more tread, more aggressive. Here's a scenario where this Gladiator, one of my friends, gets stuck on this trail, and we just utilize the kinetic recovery rope. It's a real simple, easy recovery. We were able to step over there and give him the recovery rope. Slow and steady is the way to go. We're not damaging anything. We're not ripping the bumper off. Kind of get stuck one more time, and we're able to pull him out, and it's a pretty quick, safe recovery. Here's a situation where a Gladiator slid off the trail, and we're doing a misdirect pull. So what we're doing is we're taking the winch line up the hill to a tree and then to the back of his bumper. What we're wanting to do is pull him out of the situation. The vehicle didn't have a winch on it, so we couldn't pull him forward. It was too slick on that side to get another vehicle over there, but we were able to pull him back out on the trail and then get him on his way. This scenario is one of my best friends, and this is a place called China Wall out in Colorado. And like I said before, pictures and videos never show you the real extent of the elevation or how steep something is. I'll kind of set this up. What is happening, he was the very last vehicle, which was kind of a bad idea. We probably should have had a little more capable vehicle at the end of the line in case we did have a situation. He does have a winch, and he does have recovery points. But what happened was he came around. We were trying to get him up on this rock at a different angle. He got to this point, the vehicle kind of slid a little bit, and he got hung up. And then I was asking him to slowly, because the gear ratio of an Xterra is not the same. It's not low geared like a Jeep. So I'm asking him to slowly kind of bump it over that and then hold the brake. But he kind of gave it a little bit too much skinny pedal. And the vehicle, this is probably the closest. And you can see my leg coming out, like I'm going to stop this vehicle because I'm up there doing kind of the safety control of this. And it wasn't very safe, obviously. But situations like this happen. And so what we did is we got the team together. There's our whole good group, about 10 guys and girls. And we assessed the situation. And we decided what we needed to do was run a winch up to the top. We had to go a long ways to a tree and then come back down so we can control him here. And all we're wanting to do at this point is straighten the vehicle up, hold it safely so it can't slide on down the vehicle. Now I'm up here at this vantage point trying to understand, hey, what's the safest way to do this? We all talked about it. As you can see, we have more recovery gear sitting here if we need it. One of the things I called out to the guy at the bottom was, hey, you're in the line of fire. You need to move to the other side. And he's like, oh yeah, good point. I said, yeah, if something breaks, where are you going to go? You're not going to be able to react fast enough to get out of the way. So as you can see from the video, he moves to the other side. He's got plenty of room to work his winch. And at this point, we're just going to put tension on the vehicle and allow it just to kind of slide around. It did exactly what we thought it would do. And then we kind of release tension on it. He's able to kind of straighten up. And you can even see here, this back tire is going to come off the ground because this is a very steep drop off here. So we still are under control. We get it to where it's safe. And at that point, we can remove the winch and then go on down the trail. But that's one of those scenarios where everybody needs to stop, kind of work the problem, assess what's the best option for the vehicle that we have, for the stuck vehicle and the assist vehicle. And we've had a very successful recovery. A couple other things that you should have with you this is just a Harbor Freight Badlands. These were actually on clearance one time for like $5. But this goes over the winch line. It does a couple of things. One, it allows you, if the line happens to break, this is it's kind of like a weighted vest. The winch line is just going to drop down and hopefully safely not shoot back at a vehicle or at a bystander. The other thing that is very important is that it's the color and the reflection. So a lot of time when you're doing a recovery, you're doing it across the trail. And as you've seen in some of the other videos, you see other vehicles coming and they may not be paying attention. So if you've got that out on your winch line, it's kind of like, hey, stop, we're doing a recovery here, and pay attention. The other thing is gloves. And I put these in the door when I'm on a trip. Two things go in the door. Soft shackle goes in the door, and this goes in the door. I always jump out with those two things every time we have recovery. I go ahead and throw these babies on because I never know what's going to happen. I've seen so many of my friends cut their hands. They get too big of a hurry. They grab hold of a tree limb and it cuts them. They grab hold of something, a winch or something burns their hand or scrapes their hand. So I would definitely recommend winching gloves every time you get out of the vehicle for recovery. So we're going to talk a little bit about the hand signals when we're winching. We have just a very few signals, so they're easy to remember. The first one is if we want the vehicle to turn that's being winched, it's just, right or left, or it's just like I'll talk about here in a minute in spotting, it's driver passenger. The other thing is when we do a winch scenario and the driver inside the vehicle, I ask the driver to let go of the winch controller, set it down, put both hands on the steering wheel, and remain there until we give you the all clear that everything's done and we're ready for you to put your hand on the winch. I've seen so many people have this in their hand and accidentally activate it and not hurt anybody, but it scares people. So we say put your hands on the steering wheel, and then when we give you the green light to either a verbal command on the radio or a thumbs up, then you can grab the winch controller. The next thing we do is we do the motion like this. This means that we want you to power in the winch, so start pulling the winch in. If we need you to pull the winch out, it's just down like this. Another one of our signals that we use is this little, it's like pulse it. So hey, just give it a little bit, pulse. Another one that's kind of universal for everything we do is this means stop. If you're being spotted or the winch, this is stop. And the other one is if you're winching and you need someone to hit the brakes, it's this. This is brakes. So we just put our hands together for brakes. If we want them to come, it's very simple. We just do the come forward, go back up a little bit. It's very simple controls. Spotting. So this is one of the biggest, probably the biggest pet peeve that I have when we're out on a trail, is because a lot of people have experience. I get it. But you really need to have designated spotters on a trail ride, a day out to the off-road park, an overlanding trip across the country. We usually designate spotters. I'm usually one of the number one spotters because I'm always in the first vehicle. But what we do is we'll put those people at the mid position always and at the tail position. And we also do, if our friends or people with us don't have winches, we do winch, no winch, winch, no winch, winch, no winch, etc. So we make sure that everybody understands that when there is a recovery situation, the spotter is in control and they're the only ones that need to be giving any directions or spotting, unless it's an emergency and I miss something, where you yell out stop or something. But most scenarios, we need someone that is someone you can trust. So a lot of times we'll go on a trail ride and someone will ask me, hey, could Chad come spot me? Absolutely. I'll stop my vehicle. I'll walk back. I'll do the spotting. I generally want to do the spotting anyways because I kind of feel a little bit like I have a responsibility for the people that are with me. One of the things I always tell people is when we're doing this, it's always slow and controlled. Don't be using the skinny pedal. Unless I tell you to floor it, don't floor it. Everything's going to be controlled. Don't get in a hurry. You want to make sure you listen to the spotter. That's another thing is if you get in a scenario and if you think it's a little bit of a hairy situation and they can safely get out of their vehicle, because a lot of times they're not even made it to it. They're like, hey, I'm coming up this obstacle. Could you please spot me? Absolutely. And I'll say, hey, why don't you go ahead and get out of the vehicle and look at what we're going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you to put the driver tire over this rock. I'm going to ask you to put the passenger tire over here. And then I'm going to tell you to turn driver. Whatever I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a little bit of a brief review of what that is. Get back in the vehicle, then you need to trust me. The biggest problem is when you get on a spotting situation and maybe it's off camber and people get scared and you're like, no, you have to turn driver, and they want to turn passenger because they want to go downhill. Well, that may be a dangerous situation. So you have to stop them and say, look, you have to listen to me. Listen to what I'm saying. And everyone else, a lot of times you get like I said, you get out, 15 people want to say, turn right, turn left, do this, do that. No, everybody be quiet. I kindly say be quiet, and then if I have to go to the point, it's like, everybody just shut up, let me do this. I hate to do that, but sometimes you have to do that. The signals are really simple. They're either driver, passenger, or come forward, go back, stop. And the other one we use is bump it. Maybe you get into a situation where you're kind of bouncing up on a rock, you can't get over it, and I'm like, hey, you're going to have to give it a little gas. You're going to have to bump over that rock. The other thing that I say is I let people know, hey, you're coming off of about a, whatever it is, 18-inch drop off. All right, you're about to hit the drop off. All right, easy, brakes, brakes, brakes. Hit your brakes. Okay, you slide down. All right, you're good. You're good to go now, and we can release them to go. And I see this so many times when we're out and we have to do something, and somebody wants to pull somebody, they don't have a recovery point, they throw it on the ball. And as you probably have seen this one on all kinds of social media, I believe that guy didn't make it. But I would 100% recommend not to use this. If you have a vehicle like I have, then just get one that's built, purposely built, with a bow shackle that attaches to it, not a hitch. You know, a straight line, heavy duty receiver is built for the purpose of a rear recovery or rear towing, not a ball, because you never know. These things can break off and they shoot out like a cannon. I've got a couple other little things that are not really in the PowerPoint here. This is kind of a new one that we've started doing, and it's kind of part of recovery, kind of just part of safety, and it's this envelope. And on this envelope, you can see it says emergency information. I ask that anybody now that goes on a trip with me, they fill one of these out. You can just do it by hand. You can do it on your computer. But what's inside of this is a scenario where, let's say you have a good friend, but you don't know who their emergency contact is. Maybe they're not married, or maybe you've never met their wife. Maybe you don't have their wife's phone number. Let's say somebody gets injured, somebody gets in a wreck while you're out on one of these trips. Who are you going to call? How do you even know what to do? So I tell everybody they have to put one of these in their vehicle. This has my information just in case if someone else finds it. My address, my phone number. You list your medical conditions. So I have friends, that have heart conditions, that have maybe some sort of epilepsy or some kind of seizure thing, or maybe it's somebody I don't even know and they go into something and I'm like, what's going on? At least we know that this is in their glove box. We can go check their medical condition and see, hey, this guy's having an allergic reaction to something, or whatever it is. We list out our blood type, O positive for me. So that way, if you did get in a vehicle accident and you're in Arizona somewhere and you go to the hospital and they ask, hey, what's the blood type? What's this? What's that? Who's the emergency contact? Well, all that stuff's on here. I also list what kind of allergies you have. I have one allergy. It's clindamycin. And that way, if I get in a situation where I need something, they know, hey, we can't give him this. And then I have emergency contacts, more than one. One is my dad, but if he's unreachable, then the other one is my girlfriend. So you can call her, you can call my dad. You've got their address, phone number, and who they are. But this is a very invaluable thing that you should have in your vehicle, really at all times. So if you were in an accident, I know people say, well, I've got that on my cell phone. Well, what if the accident is on a trail and your cell phone gets wet, or you lock your cell phone and we can't get into it? I would just 100% recommend doing this emergency contact information. I appreciate it. I hope that was valuable to people. If you got any questions, or if I said anything wrong or you want to correct me, obviously you can get down in the comments below. Please if you enjoy this kind of content, it just encourages me. Go and like it, subscribe. You can catch me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Pretty much all social media. I'm out there. I really enjoy doing these. We do these situations and these classes live here at our facility, but we also try to do these recordings too for people that can't come. So anyways, I appreciate it, and see you out on the trail.